Welcome to planning for the next phase of the 2020-2021 school year. This is Jennifer Maddox, Public Information Officer with San Jose Unified. With me today are Superintendent Nancy Alberon, Deputy Superintendent Susan McMahon, Associate Superintendent Jody Lax, and Assistant Superintendent Dominic Bejarano. Today's session will be recorded and available for replay following the event. We'll be responding to questions submitted prior to the session throughout the presentation. This format is different than previous sessions, as we wanted to ensure all families had an opportunity to ask questions, even if they're unable to attend the event live. We will not be taking live questions during the session today. However, if you have questions at the end of the session, we will be sharing how you can submit those questions, and we will respond to those and share them after. I will now turn the session over to Superintendent Nancy Alberon.
Thank you, Jennifer. Welcome, everyone. I'm Nancy Alberon. I'm the superintendent, and I want to thank you for taking time from your busy day to spend the next hour with us talking about this next important phase of your child's schooling experience. So our format today is going to be simple. We're going to spend some time discussing where we've been so that we understand everything that has brought us to where we are today. Then we're going to move to the current situation and what is happening now. We'll talk a little bit about where we're going and how we're going to get there together. But I just again want to thank you for being here with us today. We thank all those parents and employees that submitted questions ahead of time. Those questions were used to build this content to really address the things that were top of mind. As you have more questions and you send those in after the session, we will build the next set of webinars around those questions and get information out to you as quickly as possible. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. As you're aware, we are currently in distance learning. And this, I have to say, was one of the most difficult decisions that we've had to make. We have tried to be incredibly thoughtful and intentional with every decision, but also recognizing that the impacts of the decisions that we make affect every family differently, every employee differently. We recognize that every family has a unique situation and that there's no perfect solution to this very complex problem that we are grappling with. But I do want you to know that we are parents, we understand, we have students that are in distance learning too, and can empathize with how challenging the last 6 months have been. And please know that we're committed to continuing to put what's best for our students forward and maintaining those appropriate safety protocols to mitigate risk, continuing to make progress in our county in the right direction so that we can return students back to campus soon. So with that, let's talk a little bit about where we were in June. In June, we convened a reopening task force, and that reopening task force consisted of a variety of stakeholders. It included our parent leaders, it included labor group leaders, teacher representatives, other staff members, principals, and the task force spent several sessions studying the research, the models that were available internationally, some of the models that were being implemented in other states, and they really did a thorough job of reviewing what might be available for us to select as a model. They were very thoughtful and intentional in their work as well, and they selected a model that they felt would best serve our students while operating within the constraints of local conditions. Again, there wasn't a perfect model. Every model had challenges, every model had strengths, but their recommendation was really best based on what they were hearing from our stakeholders, and that would allow us to address the constraints of local health conditions as well. In July, as we continue to monitor the public health data, we made the extremely difficult decision to begin school in distance learning. We knew that that was going to be a challenge, but we were prepared to make it based on the current health conditions. That's the slide. So just very quickly to recap, the model that we landed on with the task force was one that provided flexibility through live instruction. It allows us to be fully at school if the health conditions are better, or fully at home if required to for a variety of reasons, including needing to quarantine or the public health orders not allowing us to fully open. The key elements of this model is it allows us to provide flexibility to students to be in one environment or the other without losing a large amount of instructional time if the health conditions require us to move from in-person to being in distance learning. This image, you can see a teacher with a smaller group of students in the classroom. That lesson is being live streamed, leveraging the technology and the applications that we have. To students who are participating in that same lesson at home. Again, this allows families the choice to be in distance learning if that best meets their needs, and students that needed to be in person could access their instruction in person. Again, there's no perfect model, but this model allowed us maximum flexibility and allowed us to move the environment to the next constraints that we might be faced with the local health order. Why the task force landed on this model? First and foremost, it provides synchronous instruction with a teacher for the entire day. During our discussions at the end of the school year last year, there was a lot of discussion about how challenging it was to be accessing asynchronous instruction for families because students really needed that time with their teacher live to be able to engage with the content, ask questions, and get support with the teacher online. So that this model allows for live instruction for the entire instructional day and get support from their teacher if they need it during that time. It also allows students and staff to maintain the connection to their school community. Some of the other models that were being considered would have required large numbers of students and staff to be moved to other school sites or classrooms in order to accommodate the smaller class size. And we heard very loudly that families found the connection to the school very, very important. And our staff members were committed to being in those schools and working in the communities where their schools were located. And so the committee wanted to be very responsive to that very important need that was voiced. If, for example, we had teachers that only did virtual and students that only did in person, it would require movement of a lot of individual students and teachers, and not with no guarantee that we would be able to accommodate for every class, subject area, grade, and school. This model lends itself to not having to move students or teachers in large numbers, and again allows for live instruction either at school or at home, depending on the health condition. This model isn't a hybrid model, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion in other places that are considering bringing some students on campus and having students at home and rotating. The reopening task force did that analysis and found that that might not bring in the type of risk mitigation that we needed to make sure that we could maintain cohorts, small cohorts, and stable cohorts. Now we're going to talk a little bit about when July hit, we knew that in July the case counts in Santa Clara County were on a steep upward trajectory. That was not what we wanted to see right before the opening of school. And so we made the difficult decision to begin distance learning for everyone in the fall and stay in distance learning for the first 6 weeks of school until October. We also made the commitment to message to families before that October deadline to indicate what we would be doing for the next several weeks. And so looking at the data in September and monitoring it closely, while the case counts were beginning to improve, there were still a lot more cases than when schools were closed in March. If you recall, in Santa Clara County, we weren't allowed to have indoor gatherings and other things, and we felt that the schools are an extension of the community, that it was important that we do our part to help bring those case counts down and make sure that our students were still continuing to be at home, while our employees, the majority of them, were teaching the lessons from their classroom. So that is where we are today. We decided that we would be in distance learning through the end of the semester, which is December. And for a variety of reasons, the health, because of the case counts, COVID-19 case counts, and also to maintain that consistency for students. They have been using Canvas, doing distance learning. Our teachers have been preparing their lessons and refining lessons using those new applications that we rolled out across the district. And so it's important to maintain that consistency for the remainder of the semester as we continue to prepare for the next phase. So now I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Stephen McMahon, who's going to spend a little bit of time talking about where we currently are.
Thank you. We just wanted to spend a few minutes to give you an update on the current status. When we decided to go with distance learning in August, the commitment was to get as many students as possible connected to their classmates and their teachers in a warm, welcoming environment. We did want to take a look at the data to see how we did. We used 2018-19 because it was the last complete school year that the state recorded the chronic absenteeism rate. Chronic absenteeism is missing 10% or more of the school year. For that last full year of data, we had a 9.8% chronic absenteeism rate. So far this school year, it's down to 6.6%. So we've been really successful in getting our students online, hotspots, the devices, the support from families, the amazing work by our teachers. Students are attending class at record numbers. While that's a positive, we know many of our students are not thriving in the distance learning environment. That's why we're spending so much time today and working so hard to plan a path forward to getting students back on campus. So we have been successful with distance learning, but many of our students need much more than the online environment. We're working hard to be able to create that opportunity as soon as we can. We also want to highlight the safety protocols that have been in place since July. So we've been requiring face coverings, physical distancing, symptom screening. We've changed our cleaning protocols. We have a testing and tracing system, and all of these together have proven extremely effective. We have almost 3,000 people working in San Jose Unified right now in an in-person environment. They're on our campuses, they're at our work sites, and thankfully we have had no spread of the virus in the workplace. We have had employees test positive for COVID-19, but because of our safety protocols, none of those positive tests have spread to anyone else at the workplace. So we're fortunate to have several months of experience implementing safety protocols for all of our employees. That gives us both knowledge and practice on how to make sure when students do come back to campus, we can extend those safety protocols to our students. Also want to highlight the success of our collaborative approach, whether it's working with our labor groups, partners in Santa Clara County, other school districts, the County Office of Education, state agencies, public health department. We're constantly working together to do the best we can to respond to this pandemic. We're always learning new information. We're becoming more informed, more aware of how the virus behaves. But as a school district, we need our partners to help us implement the best practices when we learn that new information. So we're really thankful that we have such strong partnerships. No one is saying it's easy. Many of the conversations are tense, they're challenging. We're all working together to solve complex problems, but we're thankful that we're continually talking and collaborating very frequently. As we move forward with the plan for getting students back onto campus in January, that collaboration will continue. We'll be doing it as closely as we can with all of these partners to make sure whatever San Jose Unified does is supported, is the best it can be, and it is done with that collaborative spirit. So this meeting is to talk about how we're planning for the next phase of the school year. It's the end of October. January is still a couple months away. we need to do a lot of things to be ready for students to be back. One of the most important things is continuing to monitor the health situation around us. Right now, all of our students are fully at home. We hope in January to be able to maintain the option for parents to have their students stay fully at home, while also providing the option for some students to be fully at school. We're going to go through the details of how we're going to get there in the next few slides, but it's important to emphasize that during this meeting, we're working towards the goal of the fully at school option for some students in January and maintaining the fully at home option for some students in January. But we can't say with certainty where we'll be because we've still got 2 months of public health data to monitor. We'll go over the details of how we're going to monitor in the next few slides. But we do want to emphasize how hard we're working to get some students the fully at school option in January. And I'll turn it back to Nancy, our superintendent, to give you more details on where we're going.
Thank you, Stephen. So, as many of you are aware, California has adopted a new blueprint system to monitor the virus level in each of the counties in California. And I'm happy to report that Santa Clara County continues to make progress in slowing the transmission of COVID-19. We recently moved to the orange tier, which designates moderate spread. So, understanding that we are in the orange tier, and that is the tier that allows us to open, we are planning under the assumption that the county will remain in the orange tier or better, which is the yellow tier, and students may be offered an in-person instructional option starting January 5th. Again, I want to emphasize that point that if we remain in the orange tier or better, we will offer in-person instruction for some students starting January 5th. If for some reason we move to the red or purple tiers on the last day that will be reported prior to that opening, so December 30th is when the dashboard will be updated prior to the January 5th opening. If on December 30th we move to red or purple, we're going to postpone the in-person instruction option until the county returns to the orange tier. So our teachers are continuing to work in their classrooms now, the majority of them. They will be back to work on January 4th, and then January 5th would be the day that students return for in-person if their families choose for them to do so. Students will not be required to return to in-person instruction and can continue with distance learning for the second semester. So I want to emphasize that because we have education code now that is put into place for the school year that allows families to maintain that option of staying at home and accessing their learning through a distance learning approach. So again, families will have that option to remain if that makes sense for the family and for the student. So our live instruction model lends itself to this option because all along it's been with the idea that some students would be in person and some students whose families choose would be accessing that same instruction via a live stream. So again, assuming we remain in orange or yellow, on January 5th, we will have some students in person and some students remaining at home and accessing the lesson through a live stream. You will continue to have access to your teacher, students will continue to have access to your teacher for the entire instructional day. There will not be the recorded lessons that are posted. We will remain with the model that we have now, with the difference being that some students will be on campus and some students will continue to be at home accessing them.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Before we move further into the details of how we will get there, let's take a few questions, and we'll be doing this a few times throughout the session today. I'll be asking questions that were submitted in advance, and we'll give our panel an opportunity to respond. Nancy, this first question is for you. Can parents opt to keep their students in distancing if they do not want them to return? And if so, can they pick only specific days a week that they want to come?
Again, we want to recognize that choice is really important for families because everybody has different circumstances. So parents will have the option to make a selection of in-person or remaining distance learning in November. The selection is going to apply for the remainder of the school year, unless the health conditions dramatically change and we're allowed to offer everyone in-person. But again, that option will be made by families in November. In-person students will be in person for 5 days a week, except when they need to stay home due to symptoms, illness, or quarantine. Our teachers and classmates depend on the consistency. That came out very clearly in our surveys and a lot of the conversations that we have with families and staff. It's really, really important that we know who is on campus to be able to mitigate risk factors and that students not be coming in and out. And so students that choose that in person will be expected to be in school 5 days a week. And then the students that want to be in distance learning should remain in distance learning 5 days a week.
Thank you. Next question, Stephen, is for you. You talked a little bit about the fact that we'll be watching the data. Can you just elaborate on that a bit? So the COVID cases in our county have rise. Given that constant fluctuation, we'll be on up to the minute data.
So the County of Santa Clara has aligned itself more and more to the state guidelines. So we're now following California's blueprint for a safer economy. That's why we're using the terms orange and yellow. If you go on the internet and look at the California blueprint, you'll see there's 4 tiers. Every Tuesday, the state updates the status for the county. So what we're moving forward with is on December 30th, there'll be a Tuesday update released by the state of California that will give the tier status for Santa Clara County. If we remain in the orange, our current tier, or improve to the yellow, the tier above, we'll be able to have students back on campus in January. If the health conditions worsen and we go backwards to the red tier or to the purple tier, we will not move forward on January 5th with in-person. So it's not quite up to the minute. The state is monitoring the data on a weekly basis. We're trying to give a lot of advance notice to our community to let people know what we're moving forward with. At the same time, give them a way to watch the status that's very public. So any member of the San Jose Unified community can go onto the state's website, type in Santa Clara County, see our current tier status. If we're orange or yellow, plan for the in-person option. If we go backwards and public health conditions are less favorable, we're going to remain in distance learning. So it's a long way of saying we're going to use current public health information aligned to the state system in a way that all members of our community can watch and get an assessment on, are we moving in a direction that's favorable or less favorable.
Great, thank you, Stephen. And Jody, this next question. Nancy talked about this a bit with the live instruction model. Will teachers be instructing students online and in person at the same time? If so, is it possible to add more asynchronous options?
The live instruction model is the only way that we can fulfill the state requirements for instructional minutes and provide students with synchronous instruction throughout the school day. The instruction for both students in person and students participating from home will be different than it has been traditionally. Teachers will be managing a class with students in different locations, and it will be an adjustment for the teacher and the students. Our classrooms all have a camera designed to follow the speaker so that classmates at home will be able to see classmates that are in person and will be able to see the teacher as they move around the classroom. Students will continue to use their devices when they are in person on campus. We're not looking to add any asynchronous options because it creates significantly more paperwork and tracking for teachers, which takes away the time they need to plan for instruction. The state requires all minutes spent on independent work to be logged by student by day. We will continue to provide professional development and support for our staff in order to improve teaching and learning this year as we move students to in-person on.
Great, thank you, Jody. And last question in this section. Again, Jody, we'll go back to you for this one. Will there be traditional in-person teaching that takes place off the screen?
So yes, the students that attend in person will be able to see the teacher in person and will not have to join the class WebEx during instruction. The assignments will still be given through Canvas, and all students, including those that are in the classroom, will still submit assignments through Canvas. Remember that people on campus will be required to maintain a 6-foot social distance, which will require instruction that is different than what we have traditionally expected. So we want to make sure that we are aware that teachers will not be able to interact closely with students as they traditionally have because of that social distancing requirement. And we need to manage our expectations as teachers work to adjust to this new format.
Thank you, Jody. And with that, we'll transition into how we'll get there, and Jody, I'll turn it back over to you.
So we're using the Santa Clara County Public Health Guidance for Reopening Schools as the framework for our plan. And we have already put many of these pieces in place. All staff and visitors are currently required to wear face coverings on campus. Building on this safety protocol, as we prepare to return students to in-person instruction, we're updating our current COVID-19 safety protocols to mitigate risk of exposure with students on campus. Face coverings will be required for all in-person students and employees at all times during the school day, except when eating or drinking or during intense physical outdoor activities. It's important to note that we also have some students with special needs that will not be able to wear a mask because of their physical or other restrictions, and we will work with those students on a case-by-case basis. Students will be required to adhere to the face covering protocol when on campus and will not be allowed to remain on campus if they do not comply. Additionally, all students and staff must remain 6 feet apart at all times during the school day, as our staff are now. Classrooms will be modified to ensure desks are spaced 6 feet apart and students and staff can maintain that 6-foot distance at all times. The movement of students on campus during the school day will have to be modified to ensure students and staff can maintain physical distance. Remember that the main safety protocol for secondary students is face covering and the 6-foot physical distance.
Great, thank you, Jody. And we'll take a few questions here. This section has been something that has been the subject of many questions from the community. So, Jody, this first one will be for you. Will we be requiring students to wear masks? And what happens if a student refuses?
So we are requiring that students will wear a face covering that covers their nose and their mouth. We will provide training to explain what that means and what does that look like. We're confident that our students will support a positive and safe climate by wearing their masks, and we will provide multiple opportunities to teach and model our expectations. If students struggle to comply with this requirement, we will use our existing policies and processes to respond to the situation.
And we will go back to you for this next question. Will the physical distancing protocol be followed in classrooms? And how many students will be able to be in a classroom?
The physical distancing protocol is required at all times on campus, and that does include the classroom. So classrooms that cannot fit the full roster of students with 6 feet of distance between them will be capped according to the available space.
And Jody, the last question in this section is also for you. What will in-person PE look like? And will distance learners still be participating in PE?
So this question has definitely come up a lot. We're still working through the specifics of courses such as physical education, band, choir, and drama, and how those will be conducted with some students in person and some at home. We do know that these courses have different needs in order to be effectively taught, and we will be working collaboratively with staff at the site to make those decisions, and we'll be sharing more details in the next few weeks.
Great, thank you, Jody. And Stephen, we'll turn it back to you.
So we've had a safety training and symptom screening process in place since July. We have most of our employees back at their work sites and actively doing their jobs on campus. It's been a very successful program. So before employees return to an in-person environment, they watch a safety training video. On a daily basis, they take a symptom screen. The symptom screen is aligned to the COVID-19 symptoms we all should be watching for. Comes directly from the public health department. We will follow this same protocol for when we have students back on campus. There'll be training for our students, and all of our students will be expected and required to complete a daily screen before they come to school. So one of the most important things we can do is check for symptoms. And before you come to an in-person environment, make sure you're symptom-free. If you do have symptoms, it doesn't necessarily mean you have COVID-19. It just means we need to follow up, make sure we understand what's causing the symptoms, do the proper assessments, and then get you back on campus. So we've had a really successful system for training and screening. It's going to apply to anyone who comes onto the campus, student, staff, worker, visitor. If you're coming onto a San Jose Unified campus, you have to do the screen first. We've also had a great system for testing and tracing. We follow up per state and federal guidelines if there is a COVID-19 exposure. Unfortunately, we have had employees test positive for COVID-19. It's a reality in today's world that people are getting the virus. Thankfully, we've had no one spread the virus within San Jose Unified. So all of the positive cases came from outside the workplace, and no positive case spread to someone else. And it's because we've been so focused on our safety protocols. The face masks or face coverings, the distancing, the hand washing. When you implement the safety protocols, you can slow and stop the spread of the virus. And because we're doing our testing and tracing, we've been able to identify when there's a positive case and make sure we follow up with all the close contacts and notify the appropriate individuals on the next steps. That same exact process will apply to students. We'll have a system in place for close contacts. We'll have a system in place for exposures. And all of this is aligned to the county health department guidelines.
Dominic, this first question is for you. What is our plan for testing?
The Santa Clara County issued an order to local health providers to provide COVID-19 tests for symptoms, no matter or regardless of the symptoms. This also includes employees can be tested through their healthcare provider or at one of the Santa Clara County. We are working with Santa Clara County or with the County Office of Education and Local District in the county to expand testing to make it more convenient for staff. All staff that come into contact with students will be required to do testing on a regular basis. We will be finalizing the details.
Thank you. And next question, Dominic, we'll go back to you. Will in-person students be tested on a regular basis?
So currently, we do not believe we are able to require in-person students to be tested on a regular basis. We are continuing to work with local and state agencies to clarify what we can require for students. Students are required to be tested. They have one or more symptoms, or one of their household or close contacts.
And Stephen, next question is for you. You talked a little bit about the tracing and testing that was in place. Can you talk a little more specifically about how the contact tracing happened?
Sure. You can think of it as two distinct environments. There's the school environment or the workplace environment, and then there's the external environment. So one of the most important things is that the partnership between us and public health. If there's a positive test in the workplace or school environment, San Jose Unified is responsible. We identify the close contacts, we give them the proper guidance, we do all of the follow-up and the notification. We also tell the public health department about the positive test so they can do the same thing with the close contacts and other individuals that might have been exposed outside the environment. So if one of our staff members tests positive, we look at their work environment and follow up. Public health would look at their home environment and follow up. So we're working with each other to make sure we identify any close contacts an individual may have. We give the proper guidance and advice on next steps for those individuals. This is something that all school districts, as they bring students back, should be doing. The public health department released a guide for reopening schools. If you go to the back of it, you'll see several charts on what to do based on the scenario. So this document is available online at the Public Health Department website. It's the guide for reopening schools. You can go to the end of that document and scenario by scenario, see what actions we would take and what communications we provide. We will follow this protocol. I'll go through a couple examples. If we have a student or a staff member that has symptoms such as a fever, we're going to send them home, instruct them to get a COVID-19 test. We're going to notify the administrative team. We're going to make sure the individual stays home till we get the results of that test. But we're going to be able to keep the classroom and the workspace open because we don't yet have a positive result. So we're going to send the individual home and assess the situation. But because it's not a positive yet, everything stays open. Second scenario, a family member or close contact of an employee or student tests positive. So we still don't have a positive test in our environment, but we have one through a close contact. We would notify all of the close contacts to monitor symptoms. The individual who's the close contact of the positive test would have to quarantine at home. The administrative team is going to monitor that individual student, and everyone in that student's cohort would be given a notification. So the student in the class whose family member tested positive, while the student may not be positive, everyone in that group would be given a notification to monitor for symptoms. Third scenario is when we actually have a positive test in our environment, school or workplace. The individual is immediately sent home. They need to stay home at least 10 days after the symptoms appear, and they have to clear all of those symptoms before they can return. We immediately notify public health of the positive test. As I described before, the public health department will go through the close contact protocol for that individual outside of San Jose Unified and their close contacts or exposures. Internally, because we now have a positive case with someone who was on a campus, anyone in that grouping is going to be sent home and asked to quarantine. We're going to instruct them to get a test, and we would notify the entire school community. So if we have a positive test at a school, we're going to identify that cohort, send the entire group home, and notify the entire school community. So again, short overview of the multiple scenarios we might experience. On the employee side, we've already experienced them. So we've run these protocols internally. Thankfully, we've had no virus spread. When students do come back to campus, we're going to need to run these protocols. It's a reality. If you want to read through all of the details, you can get this document online. It's useful, and it is what San Jose Unified will be following as we welcome students back.
Thank you, Stephen. And Nancy, this last question in the section. Who will be responsible for the contact tracing?
As Deputy Superintendent Stephen McMahon shared, it is a partnership between San Jose Unified and Public Health. We are responsible for close contact identification, as it's called, when it's a school site case or a case in the department. We have to conduct the interviews, identify who that individual came into contact with, gather that individual's information, and then very quickly share that with the Public Health Department, who then will contact individuals that they came into contact with outside of the district. Each school site has a person that is identified and will be the point of contact for any COVID-19 exposure or positive case. The site contact will be in constant communication and coordination with our COVID-19 designee, who is our manager of health services, Katie Rodriguez. She has an outstanding relationship with public health and is in constant communication. So she will be getting that information and coordinating with public health so that they are aware of the case.
And with that, Stephen, we'll turn it back over to you.
So another thing that has changed in San Jose Unified is our cleaning and disinfecting protocol. Our custodians are working very differently than they would normally. We're doing a lot less vacuuming because their time is focused on high-touch surfaces and high-traffic areas. So this has been in place for months, like all of our safety protocols. Any space that is shared by people from different households, is cleaned and disinfected at least once a day. High-touch surfaces get attention multiple times throughout the day, and common areas like restrooms or eating areas are also getting attention multiple times a day. So this is a protocol that our custodians have already implemented. Again, there are a lot of things to pay attention to with 3.3 million square feet, but to ensure the health and safety of our community, their work is focused on those high-touch surfaces and high-traffic areas. As we welcome students back to class, there'll be an increase in the high-touch surfaces, so we'll have to pay particular attention to the desks. We'll be working with our entire school communities on making sure they have the safety training and making sure they're very conscious of what they're touching and how to clean it and do those things safely and properly so we can keep the whole community safe. Another major change for us is our ventilation systems. HVAC is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Most of San Jose Unified systems do all three. In our largest spaces like gymnasiums, we don't have air conditioning. We only have heating and ventilation. So our interior spaces, for the most part, have all three. Some of our interior spaces, the largest ones, have heating and ventilation only. It's important that the community knows that ventilation is a key. Regardless of whether we're heating the space or cooling it, we're always ventilating it. If people are in the room, the system is running to circulate the interior air. The change we've made in response to the pandemic is as we circulate that interior air, it's drawing as much outside air as the machine will allow. So our HVAC systems are now set to maximize the circulation of outside air. It's taking the air in the room, moving it out, bringing air in from the outside, running it through the filter, and circulating the air throughout the room. We're also replacing our filters with MERV 13. That's the highest level we're comfortable going with to make sure we can maintain airflow. As you increase the filter effectiveness, you slow down the airflow. So working with our medical professionals, they've emphasized airflow is the most important. Our staff will have complete permission to open doors and windows. Many of these are practices that will make heating and cooling less efficient, but we're fine with being less efficient to ensure we have maximum air circulation and ventilation of all of our interior spaces.
We'll stop here for another couple of questions. The first one is for you. We talked about a lot of different safety protocols that we will be following. Do we have the necessary budget to meet all of these requirements?
Yes, I think it's common knowledge that public schools in California do not have the resources we'd like to have to face the cost of living in our area, to provide all the services we'd like to provide to students. So we always are strained in our ability to do everything we want for students. But San Jose Unified has a long history of prioritizing, making sure we're in a strong financial position. And we did that at the onset of the pandemic. So as soon as the pandemic started, we analyzed what are we spending money on and what can we turn off, because we knew we needed to secure funds to respond to the emergency. So we have all of the funds necessary to get the PPE, to buy the new filters for our HVAC, all of the technology we've invested in to support our students online. We don't have new money to accomplish those tasks. We're not spending other funds to make sure we can prioritize our spending on the most important things. So things we would have done in a normal school year are not happening, so we can make sure every student has a device, every student that needs one has a hotspot. All of the changes we've made to get our staff and our students safe is what we're investing in, and we do have the resources to continue that for this entire school year.
And next question also talked about this, but kind of review for people. How do we plan to ensure adequate airflow in the classroom?
So I'll try to use a specific example to answer this question. Normally, our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems would adjust outside air and inside air for efficiency purposes. So on a really hot day, they would pull air that's already conditioned or cooled from inside the classroom, run it through the filter, run it back into the classroom. Because obviously it's more efficient to try to cool air that's already cool than to cool the outside air. If you're in your car, it's that button that switches you from exterior air to recycled air inside. Most heating and cooling systems have that feature. So to make sure we have the proper airflow, our ventilation systems have switched to pulling outside air. So on a really cold day, the system is still going to pull in maximum outside air and just work harder to heat it before it goes into the classroom. So to make sure we have the proper airflow, as I mentioned before, all of our HVACs have been set to maximize outside air, to move the air within the room. The V in the HVAC part means we're ventilating the rooms constantly. That's standard practice. We'll continue to do that. The change is to make sure that they maximize outside air.
Great, thank you. And with that, Jody, we will turn it back to you.
So we have been using the state guidance for our opening schools in order to prepare for coming school year. Staff have already been given face coverings, hand sanitizers, and disinfecting supplies for their assigned workspace. We are also in the process of ordering plexiglass physical barriers for adults in classrooms and front offices, specifically in order to protect our staff as they work with our students. Additional PPE, including face shields and gloves, will be provided to employees based on their job, their required job duties, or other state and local requirements. Each site has or is forming a safety team that will include administrators, certificated and classified employees. Our certificated employees are our teachers, nurses, counselors, and the classified employees are the office staff, campus supervisors, instructional associates, staff that are working in the library. They will be involved in the safety team and that will be responsible for implementing the district safety protocol at the work location. The site safety team will work to ensure the protocol is implemented correctly, that staff and students are in compliance with the safety protocol, but they will also work on the communication to stakeholders so that everyone in the school community is aware of the work that needs to be done and the expectations.
Great, thank you, Jody. And we will take another round of questions. First one is for you, Stephen. Will plastic desk shields be provided for each student?
So these are all difficult decisions. At this time, we're going to emphasize the 6-foot distancing for our students. We want to make sure that they maintain that spacing at all times. As Jody mentioned, we are going to be investing in physical barriers to make sure the adults are able to keep that 6-foot distance from their colleagues as well as students. But we do feel that the best approach is to maintain the 6-foot distancing at all times. We can't have barriers or shields around the students at all of the spaces they're in. So what we want to do is make sure we enforce for students, maintain your 6-foot distancing at all times. If you're sitting at your desk, 6 feet apart. If you're going outside for recreation, 6 feet apart. We want to instill that as the best practice, not have a barrier in some places because we truly can't provide them in all of them. And the investment we are making is to make sure our adults have the physical barrier so we're able to keep that spacing so students aren't going up to their teacher. I think we're all aware, the superintendent mentioned this, school is already different. It's going to be different in person. We're going to make the best of it, but we think the best opportunity to make students safe is to keep them 6 feet apart at all times.
Great, thank you. Jody, next question is for you. How will students stay distant during passing periods and at lunch and also recess or breaks?
So our safety protocol does require a 6-foot physical distance at all times on campus. The site safety teams will be working on implementing that requirement on their campus and may make modifications to the bell schedule in order to ensure the 6-foot distancing can be maintained during passing periods, during lunch, and during recess. The start and end time for each campus will not change. In addition, the site safety teams will develop a schedule to stagger restroom breaks in order to ensure students and staff can maintain 6-foot physical distancing at all times.
Thank you. And last question in this section, Jody, will be back to you. Will school uniforms be required for in-person students? And if so, will they be required for distance learners?
So while our high schools do not require uniforms, we may have students that are in elementary or middle schools that do require them. Since August, we have not required uniforms for distance learners, and we have not made a decision about the expectation for in-person learners. We will maintain the expectations for appropriate dress as outlined in our student handbook, but need to weigh the benefits of a uniform against the possible added expense to families who are already dealing with so much. This decision will be made in collaboration with site leadership and communicated at a later date.
Great, thank you. And with that, Nancy, we'll turn it back to you.
So one of the things I want to emphasize is that this endeavor that we are on and this goal that we're trying to accomplish is going to take all of our employees working together to be able to get our students back on campus. So at the district level, here at central office and at the various satellite offices that we have, the teams are working on logistics, operations, and community communication. We are going to work collaboratively and have been working collaboratively with our school sites to make sure that there is clear information, that all of our staff, our personnel are trained in the various protocols, that they're being implemented and complied with, and that any sites that need additional support have an opportunity to engage in dialogue with those of us here at central office to make sure that we can get resources and support to them as quickly as possible if anything is missing. We know that we have been working on this since the schools closed. As things were coming in, we were sharing information with our school sites. But the next step is to have our employees work side by side with us to vet all of these protocols and processes to ensure everything is ready and to have a second set of eyes on everything so that students can come back in January if their families choose for them to return. In addition to the district level teams, we have our school site teams, as Assistant Superintendent Jody Lax talked about. They will be responsible for making sure that the processes are being implemented at the school sites, for vetting the processes, for making sure that all of the supplies are there and accounted for again, and that any questions or clarity that needs to be brought to any of those is communicated back to central office staff so that we can then engage in some side-by-side work to make sure that we are prepared for that January date. We believe it's important to have a diverse set of stakeholders on these safety teams, from our teachers that are in the classroom to our support staff that are in the front offices to our custodians, our principals, the various departments and individuals in those departments, to make sure that we are all working toward ensuring that we have the most comfortable environment for our students and for our staff, to make sure that we mitigate risk. And then, we're almost out of time, but I want to just summarize the key points that we've shared with you today. I think the most important one is that we plan to have a January 5th in-person option for students if Santa Clara County remains in the orange or yellow tiers. We also are going to, our very next step will be to communicate with families a selection process in November so that you can make that determination of what is best for your family, whether it be an in-person assignment or distance learning. And once we have that information, we can continue to advance and make progress on our plan. We're continuing to prepare the school sites. And you will see more activity. You may not be on the school site, but some of you live near the school sites and will see more activity as we prepare for that eventual January 5th return. And I'm happy to report that we have very positive relationships with our labor groups. We are known across the state for having these positive relationships, and they've been in place for almost 30 years. We believe that working side by side with our employees to support our students is the most effective way to create the conditions for students to do their best learning and for employees to do their best work. And so we're continuing to stay in communication and collaboration with them. And then we're going to continue to send more regular updates to you all so you know what is happening with progress toward this goal of January 5th. And our employees will also be receiving more information. We know that a lot of information was covered here. You still have many, many questions. And so I want to invite you to take the opportunity to think about what we shared today. And as you come up with more questions, please send them to the PIO@SJUSD.org email address. Our staff is monitoring that and going through it to make sure that we understand what is top of mind still and that we can work through the content for our next communication. And then I also want to take this time to thank you again for the patience, the empathy, the support, the words of kindness that you have demonstrated. This has been hard on everyone, particularly our students and their families. But we want to just encourage you to continue to do your part, as will we, to staying safe and making sure that we stop the spread of this virus in our community. So with that, thank you so much and have a great evening.